This conference will now be recorded.
So two main sections we were trying to understand is like that was the first one. We were understanding how do we configure that master and slave configurations. That was one of the concept. That was first section, and second section we were trying to understand it. So how do we configure the tools within the Jenkins? So not only the tools, we have the tools with the environment variables. Yeah, there are the two sections we were trying to understand. But first section, like the master and slave configuration, so we have taken this one separate virtual machine as a fresh the copy of that. And first we were doing that sh configuration on that node, like editing that sh configuration file and enabling that those three properties, that is root login are required or not, and public key authentication is required or not, and the third option which we are trying to understand, that is password based logins required or not. And then we were restarting the sh service on the slave machine. And once that was done, and we were doing on the master machine, like a public key, whatever the public key which is available on the master machine, that's we are trying to copy to the slave machine by using sh copy id with user account and at the rate of that IP address. And once that is done, so we were verifying about it sh with the password logins and passwordless logins, we are able to connect it or not. Yeah, there was first configuration as a prerequisite. And then we were understanding about that, like JDK should be installed on the slave machine. So JDK we have taken that from the master machine and we have copied to the slave machine, and we were extracting and defining the environment variables in the bash rc file, and we are checking that the JDK is running or not. Yeah, there are the two steps that we were doing that as a prerequisites before configuring the master and slave. And then we were asking about the Jenkins in the node section. We were adding the node by defining about the number of executors and workspace location. So that is where exactly the workspace, the complete infrastructures, that means the commands to run it, that is work remote work area. And third property we were defining, that is launching mechanism. So launching mechanism, so that's we were defining about sh based, and we were configuring this IP address and the port with username and password. But username and the password we didn't define. We were using the credentials option, and we were using about username with the private key option. So without having the passwords to connect to this automatically to the remote system, so we have that sh based communication, and the sh based communication to use the private key of the master machine we have configured in the credentials, and public key already we have copied to the slave machine. This private key from the master machine and the public key from the slave machine, if these two are matched, then automatically we can have a connections. Yeah, that's we were defining that, and we were verifying this whether we are able to launch it successfully or not. Yes, that's we were doing that yesterday. And so if this the slave is automatically reachable, and whenever you restart this Jenkins, so it will be automatically connected to that the slave machine. And yes, but no jobs are configured on these master machines or the slave machines. We'll come back to that. How do we configure the jobs? That is the today's sections which we are going to talk at that. Yeah, that was the first section, the slaves, how to configure it. And in the second section, we are trying to understand in the like a tool configurations, we have the two sections. One is one is global level, and second one is a slave level. So any tool, if you like to install it, or if you like to define the location of the tools, the first tool is required to add it in the global level. And once if we add the tool in the global level, then we can go back to the slave level, and you can find that, or you can add the tool which is added in the global section, and we can define that on the slave where that tool is installed, the location of the tools. So tool configuration, one is global level. Global is nothing but master we are configuring, but each slave on the slave we can have the two locations in the different. But how do we define it is, that's yes, we were doing that. I mean, in the slave machine scope level, that is two locations. In the tool location, we were defining that. Yeah, there was another option so which are observing about it. There is a master and the global level and the slave level configuration, and environment variables also we can define it. So we can enable that environment variables and the list of environment variable, that is Java home or Maven home or that Tomcat home, or which we have on the basis of the tools like and home directory, or the Docker where it is installed, the Dockers. So that is on the basis of the tool, that the tool setup, whatever you are learning about it, thus we can define in the property section, and that is environment variable section. Yeah, these are the points that we were trying to understand yesterday. Now today, so what is this? The third activity we are going to talk it is. So Jenkins actions point of view, the third activity which we have this is that is the jobs management. So how do we configure the jobs? Yeah, that is a managing the jobs. Yeah, so let's talk about that, how to create a jobs. And so the first we take it as one simple job, and we'll try to observe that how do we trigger the jobs, and how do we see the output of the jobs, and how do we define the slave machines, or how do we define the build activities. So we start about that activity. So let me go for this, the Jenkins console, and let's go for the creating a new jobs. But jobs is the very important activity. So regular activity point of view, the jobs management. So master and slave configuration, one time we do that, or a tool configuration, we do that one time configuration. But the regular activity or the day by day activity which we have this is the jobs management. So let's try to understand this, how to create a jobs and how to manage the jobs. Yeah, so here whenever we select this creating a new job, it is prompting for the job name. Yes, let me define the some demo job, but we'll come back, different jobs will create it. And the job, whenever you are defining that, you need to select that to create this job, which template you are going to use it. But the templates, if you observe that we have the multiple templates, like you can create a folders, or you can create a pipeline. Yes, this is one of the advanced one, I'll come back to that. And a freestyle project, like so most of the jobs, any job you are creating, that could be Docker related or Maven related or Ant related, that could be any kind of the job. So that is the generic template. What is the generic template which we use? It is freestyle project. That is a 70 to 80% of the projects which will be created is in the freestyle project. But the latest and advanced one which we have this is especially to define the pipelines. Yes, we have the separate plugin which is helping that, the pipeline plugin. And you can define the some multi-configuration or the multi-branch, but these options you can do this from the freestyle project or the pipeline project as well as. So we are going to talk it especially the two templates. So one is the first, we are going to understand the freestyle projects, and once this understood about the freestyle project, then we'll come back and we understand this the pipeline as well as. Yeah, so let me select about this the first freestyle project. And once if we select this template, yes, you can go ahead by selecting this OK. So any generic project you are creating, that could be any kind of that activity or any kind of the shell commands you could like to run it, or Windows commands you could like to run it. So preferable is freestyle. But what is the difference between the freestyle and pipeline? I'll come back. The pipeline is advanced one, and so everything is code-wise implementation. Code. That means these pipelines also you can implement using the code. That is another important activity which we have. So I'll come back to the pipeline later. But first, let's look at about the freestyle templates. Yeah. So once if you create this job with the freestyle, so here you can find that the different sections which are available in this job. But what are the different sections are available if you just try to understand it? Like we have the general section, like some generic properties. So the general properties. We'll come back one by one to understand it. And the second section which you have this in the job is source code management. That means you can integrate with the source code repositories about the job if it is required. That is Git integration or SVN integrations or Bitbucket. But Bitbucket it is not showing here. Why it is not showing here? It is if that is required, then you need to install that plugin. So once if you install the plugin about the Bitbucket, then Bitbucket option also will be listed here. So on the basis of the plugins which you have installed, these options will be listed. Yeah, the default, whenever we were selecting or whenever you are installing the launching the Jenkins, we were installing some default plugins. Those default plugins Git and Subversion, that is SVN plugins, were installed. Yeah, so if you'd like to integrate with the source code repositories, yes, this is the section. But we'll come back. How do we integrate and how do we work with the Git or something, which will come back. And the third section which you have, this is build trigger options. So that means in which context do you want to run this current job. So we have the different approaches to trigger the job. Like we can do the manually, or we can do that like which we have on the base of the time schedulers, or on the base of Git invocation point of view, or on the base of other jobs execution, result based or output based. So we have the different approaches which will come back to that. So how do we understand these build triggers options? So how do we use it, these build triggers, which will come back? That is triggering about the jobs automatically or manually. And the next section which we have this is, and here one more point, if you just observe that the source code management or the build triggers or the build environment, these are three sections which we can say that pre-build section. Like if I try to recollect it in the before classes, we are trying to understand the entire job is the sequence of the tasks. Those sequence of the task we can classify that as a pre-build, build, post-build. But before perform the build activity, so what is the prerequisite? Yes, the source code you need to pull it. That means source code you need to download it. The code which you would like to build it, the code you need to download it. That is a pre-build. So, and when do you want to download this source code, or when do you want to trigger the build? That is the triggering options, and the build some specific environment options. So source code management integrations are the build trigger options or the build environment. We try to understand these three sections are the pre-build activity. But in the build environment, yes, what do we have? This will come back later to understand it. You can delete the workspace before the build starts, or you can add the timestamps to the console outputs. So, but what about these timestamps? How to use it? Or you can abort the build in case if it is stuck. There are some configurations, or you can enable these properties for about our build requirement point of view. There is about three sections as a pre-build, source code management, build triggers, build environment. And the next option, what do you have? This is the build section. So in this build section, so there's like actually would like to perform some commands execution, like ambient clean package, or like some shell commands, or like the Docker commands, or Ansible commands, or the Puppet commands. So what are the commands that is required to run it in the build process? Those commands we can define in this section. But how I can define or where I can define is, so here you can add the steps which are required. Like the steps, do you want to execute the shell command, or do you want to use it Windows batch command? That means you need to run some commands. Those commands, if you'd like to run on the Windows, then you can use it Windows batch command, and you can define that what are the commands that is required to run on the Windows machine. But if your target machine is the Linux machine, the Linux is a shell based, then you can use it execute shell. If we select this execute shell, and what are the commands that is required to run the Linux system, so those commands we can define here, which will come back this option to use it. But this section which is helping to add the build steps, is it shell commands do you want to run it, or Windows commands do you want to run it? But on the base of the slave machine which you are taking that, but we have taken the slave machine as the Unix based, then Unix commands we can run it using this the job. And if the target node is Windows, then Windows batch command prompt you can take it, and you can write the commands which are required to run on that node. Or only ant step if you would like to add it. That means ant build script that do you want to call it. Then you can use it invoke ant, and which target that do you want to invoke from the ant, you can define the targets which are required. And you can add it some advanced like the file names, like normally ant point of the build.xml. But if you have the any specific build file you can specify the properties if you'd like to pass it, or some Java memory arguments if you would like to specify that. So we can use it, all these options. But this is only for and commands to run it. Normal Linux commands we cannot define here. Unlike this, you can invoke that Maven also. Suppose I would like to call it about clean package. If I use it execute shell, then I need to run men clean package. But if I use it Maven step, then I can just define that clean is one goal, and the second goal which we have is the package. But men is not required to run it. And these are all the goals. And what is the Pbm file? So the default pbm.xml file, and the properties of the JVM options, and so the where the settings.xml file is available. So there are some properties you can define, but this is like only you can add the step as Maven. Yeah, so the different build options on the base of that, but the generic one, if you like to run any command, so the shell or Windows are specific to the Maven, or specific to the Ant or the Gradle, or so run some commands with the timeout options. Yes, there are different options, but on the base of the commands to execute it, the execute shell is required. Yeah, we'll come back anyway. That's to understand it, the steps. Yes. So what are the steps we are expecting in the build process? All the steps you can add it in the build section. And once the build steps have been completed, then you can add it about post build actions. That means if you'd like to send that email notifications, yes, if you'd like to send the email, then email notification, or you can publish to the gate. That means tags you can create it, or we have the some option. I'll come back to that. So there are the separate sections we have. So the job itself, we are going to talk it 2 or 3 days to understand about it. How do we define all these sections? 2 or 3 classes required to understand all these. And how you can trigger about that other projects, or you can archive that artifacts. That means you can publish that artifact which is created, or you can call those other jobs. We'll come back one by one all these stuff. So to understand some important, yeah, there are the post build activities. That means once the build activity is completed, on the base of this output, if you would like to send an email notification, or if you would like to publish about your unit test cases, or if you would like to publish about your artifacts, that's WAR files or the jar files, to other jobs point of view. So those steps which you can define over here in the post build section. Yeah, so there are the main sections which we have, like as a pre-build section, the build environment, triggering option, source code management. And once these have been defined, then you can define the build steps which are required to perform. So do you want to trigger the Maven or the Ant or Docker commands, or so the which commands? So do you want to run it in the build process with the build option? And once the build is performed, then what are the post build activities that you want to perform that? That are the post build activities. Yeah, there are the sections which are available, but let's take it initially some basic properties from each section, and we go for this one by one, understanding that. So all these sections. Yeah. So in the general, yes, you can add it about some description of it. So this job is for demo purpose. Some description of the job which we can write it. There's descriptions. And you can see that the preview, so how it is printing about it. So the job is for demo purpose, just like a plain text, because whenever the job is executing, so this is going to print it about that, the description of the job. And one more point, so the further the essentials we'll try to understand from these properties. So what are the properties? We have configured one slave machine, right? That means whatever the job which we are defining now, this job is required to run on that slave machine. I don't want to, if I don't give that any specific node, default on which machine the job is going to execute is master machine. But we have defined the separate slave machines to run the job. But how I can restrict where my job can be run? Yes, I'll come back all these remaining properties, but here if you observe this one of the property, restrict where this project can be run. If you select this property, and you can define the slave name. What is the slave name? Slave name we are giving this is, we just try to recollect it, we are giving the slave. If you just enter the first letter of the node name, then automatically it populates here. You can just select that. But it is saying that there is no agent or the cloud that matches. Just remove the space. And now you can see that with this slave machine is serviced by one node. Another restriction powered by plugins. Yeah, so this, I mean, so first you can define that the restrict where the job can be run. Yeah, so now what all the build activities you are defining, or the pulling the code from the repositories, or post build activities, everything or whatever you are defining in the job, everything will be run on this slave machine. Okay, so that's the first section. In the general, we are trying to mention one property, but we'll come back to the source code management, triggering options, one by one build environment. Now let me add it one build step. So I would like to run some basic commands. So Maven integration, all the stuff will come back later. So I mean, my slave machine is the target machines, which is a handled OS distribution as the Linux based, and so Linux commands I can run that. Suppose what are the commands like the pwd, and what is the date that's we have, like how you are defining about your shell script, list of all the commands you can write it in the sequence, and pwd date and ls, yes, whatever you would like to define it. So all the commands you can define. Suppose the source code is available, then you can run it mwin clean and deploy. That command simple. Okay, so but let's understand that the first like how do we use the jobs. Yeah, so there are some commands you can define it, but the post build activities will come back later. Let me apply it. Apply what it is doing is it saves that whatever the customization you have done, and it prompts this in the same page. That means you will be having this in the same page. But if you use it the save option, which will be saved and which will be redirected to the project home directory. Okay, so this is a project which you have created, the demo, and this is a description which you have added. And here you can see the some options like to manage the job. Like you can see the status is nothing but this page itself, and you can see the changes, workspace. I'll come back the changes and workspace, all these things once it is integrated with the repository. And what this option is build now, like that means we can trigger this build, like means we can execute this job by invoking this link, that is the build now option. The build now which is trying to trigger the job, or you can delete the job if it is no more required, or you can go back once again to the configure section and we can edit the configuration changes, or we can rename of this job. So there are some links which are available, but let's go for this executing this job. Yes, how do I executing is nothing but in our job point of view, we can call this as triggering options, but how I can trigger it. So if you just use this option, the build now, so build is scheduled, and here you can see this in the build history, one job which is in the process. So and one job which is in the process, and here you can see that, so there's some icon which is representing the status of this job. What is the status that is showing is success. Yes, what are the commands we have defined, like just like pwd or ls or date commands. So it is executed all these commands successfully. So there is the blue status which is indicating. If something is error, then you will be having that red symbol, red icon. And what is the build number that is generated for this one is, this is the first one which you have executed, the build number 1 is generated, and at what time it is executed the build. So the date and time, they're all as per the server date and times which we have. And so if you go to this, or if you select this build number, this is the build number 1 which is executed at this time and started 1 minute 3 seconds ago, and how much time it was taken is 8.5 seconds, and on which slave it was executed and on which node it is executed, this job, that is on the slave machine. And but we don't see this any changes. And which user is triggered about this build number 1 is, so it is started by this user admin, we have logged in as admin user, and with this admin user it is triggered about this job. But what are the commands are executed and what is the output of those commands? If you'd like to see that the complete console output, now you can access this build number one related the console output. So you just click on the console output. Now you can see this the complete output of the job, and this is started by this user admin. There's a manual triggered and building remotely on which machine, the slave machine. In the workspace where it is created is in this workspace directory. Yesterday we have changed that, this spelling mistake. And then so this is the workspace directory we have defined, and in this workspace directory it is created one more workspace, and what is the job name it is created is demo. So all the commands, what are the commands which I have executed in our remote location, it is created one workspace directory. That is the Jenkins. It is, I mean, Jenkins created. It is created by the Jenkins itself. We didn't create manually. And in this workspace, which job we are running is the demo job, and the demo job related complete all the commands are executed in this location. And yes, what it is doing is it is just executing as a shell script. Yes, it is what are the commands we had defined in the build section. All the commands it is saved as a temporary one .sh file, and it is executing one by one commands like a pwd. Yes, what is the current working directory and what is the date and the LNS. But we don't have those any files in this demo directory now. No files are available, so nothing is available. And finally, what is the status this we have is it is finished with a success message. Yeah, this is the console output. Yes, so how it is executed and what is that output, and the completely we can track it, or you can see this via as a plain text and edit the build information. But what you can do here, so you can just add about some display name and description of this build, but that's not required. And you can delete this build as well. So deleting the build is nothing but this build number one will be deleted. That means you are discarding about this build output. So the delete in the build, but how to manage it automatically, I'll come back later. Yeah, that's about so how to trigger the job. Suppose if I trigger one more time, so again it is going to execute it the second build number and the status, and directly you can access it from here also the console output. If you just click on this icon which is redirected to the console output, so here also you can see that the console output. Yeah, but this console output is belong to the build number 2, the second build. Like that you can trigger that n number of times, and it is keep on managing this all the build history. And yeah, so that's the point. And if you like to configure it, suppose now I would like to see the some error message, that means the build should get failure. But how I can make it the build as a failure? Suppose if I give that some wrong command, there is no L command. So if I just apply it and if I save it and if I trigger now we got that the build is error. And if you select or if you click on this icon, now you can see that yes, this command is executed successfully, date command is executed successfully, but L command whenever it is executing, L command not found. And the build step execute shall mark the build as failure and it is finished with the failure statuses. Yeah. So so that's about how do we trigger the job and how do we see the build output and how do we analyze the build. But the point what we have to see is, as we were trying to understand it, in case the build is a failure, as we were trying to understand in the process, we need to get that alert notification. Okay, now next what do we do? This is we go for the extending about the job. How do we trigger that email notification in case the build is failure? Yes, how do we trigger the job? Sorry, how do we send the email notification? Yes, so this point of view that the first Jenkins is not the mail server. So Jenkins, which is helping the build activities to perform it. But in case the build is a failure, if you like to trigger that email notification from the Jenkins, you need to integrate this Jenkins with the email server. So before going to enabling that sending email notification in case the build failure, what is the first and foremost which we need to do the some configuration is we need to integrate the Jenkins with the email server. But how do we integrate with the how do we integrate the Jenkins with email server? And I mean, email server, who will manage it? Yes, I mean, in this organization point of view, IT infrastructure team, they provide it. That's all the email details, like the map server or SMTP details, like incoming or outgoing on the base of this the requirement, incoming IMAP or outgoing, like sending the mails, that is SMTP. So those properties we need to get it, and we need to integrate about the Jenkins with the email server. Email server separate administrator that will be managed. Yeah, so what is the email server which we take it is to integrate this Jenkins. So the Gmail we have, right? Gmail server, we will use it as a mail server. That means we will integrate about our Jenkins with SMTP server. But what is the SMTP server we are going to use it is, that is the Gmail. But to integrate with this SMTP server, the first I need to get this the complete SMTP server details of the Google. So that is SMTP server. That is also like IP address, the port number, username, and passwords. So any system to system or any server you are connecting is nothing but, so there are the essential properties. What are the properties? On which system that is running, either system, IP address, or the domain names, and then port number, on which port that is running. Is it running the default port or the custom port? And once the service you have access, the required username and password. Now what do we do this is we try to search for that the Gmail related SMTP server details. So if you search in the Google Gmail SMTP server settings, yeah. So here you can get that, or you can see there's some properties. Yeah, so here are the default Gmail SMTP settings. So what is the server IP address or the domain name which you have is smtp.gmail.com. That is the IP address or the domain name. And username, yes, about our Gmail address itself, we can use it as the username, and about our Gmail password. That means one of the user account, if you have that, then you can use it, that username and password, as to connect it to this SMTP Gmail. And the finally, SSL based communication channel, what is the port that we have is 465. So we got it that. So IP address, the username, password with the port number. Okay, the SMTP server is running on the remote system on this or with these properties. Now we need to take it these properties and we need to integrate with Jenkins. Yes, the next section what do we have to say is, once we got it all these properties, how do we integrate the Jenkins server with SMTP server? I'm talking about the generic one. But here we are going to integrate with the Gmail server. But in the organization, we don't use it with the Gmail server. So about our email servers which we have, that the Exchange servers, so those servers which we try to integrate it. But who will provide those properties is, that is IT team. So if we send the email, so they will forward that all these details which are required to connect to the SMTP server. Yeah, now we take it all these properties and we try to integrate within the Jenkins. Sorry. But where do you have this option to integrate the Jenkins with the email server? I mean, we are not talking about that enabling email notification, but to enable that email notification, first email has to be integrated. Otherwise, we cannot send that email notification. The first is integrating with the email server. Yeah. Now let's try to understand that. So where we define all these properties. So if you go to the manage Jenkins, there are the configuration. Configuration we do that at global level. Yeah. If you go to the manage Jenkins, and you can ask about it configure system. So the global settings, like, but this is not the tool. SMTP server is not the tool, and so this is required to configure in the system level. So go to the configure system. And anyway, I'll come back to the some properties to discuss later. But if you just observe that somewhere you can find it, it plugins version extended email notification does not require. So yeah, so here, so we have the email notification to configure it. So here you can define SMTP server details. And now let's take it about one by one property and define that the SMTP server details. SMTP server. So what is the server that we have is, so this is SMTP server address, smtp.gmail.com. So let's define this. And default user email suffix. Suppose suffix is like if you are working for the IBM @ IBM.com. On the base of this, the domains which we have, the domains specific or suffix. So what is the domain we are using in our Gmails is @ gmail.com. Yeah, so just define that the suffix of the domain gmail.com. Yes, authentication is required for this SMTP server. Enable that and define the username and password. Now we need to get that one username and password. So I'll come back to that to define the username and password. And yes, use that SSL communication. And SSL purpose, what is the port that we have is, so that is 465. So just define that the 465 port. So in which section we are defining this about integrating the Jenkins with email server is, go to the manage Jenkins. And then so which we have like the configure system, then the email notification. And here first define that SMTP server and then prefix name, sorry, suffix or the postfix which we can say, and username and password. Let me take it that one of the Gmail account. So that is not available. So let me use it for testing purpose. I have created one. So DevOps test mail. Let me verify that I forgot this. Yes. Yeah, so this is a username and password we are going to use it. This is especially created for like to check it all these like email configurations, or you also can use it this username and password, or you can create that one user account and password and you also can use it that. Yeah, let me use this user account. So that is a DevOps test mail. And the password what we have is DevOps test mail 09. Yeah, that's about SMTP server details and suffix, and enable that SMTP authentication and define that the Gmail username and password, and enable that SSL and SMTP port and the remaining properties. So reply to address, if you like to get this any reply to address we can define. And now you have the test configuration by sending test email. Now let me do that. So enabling this option and to send the test email, I'm just defining that. So to which email ID does do you want to send this test email? That means we are sender and receiver both are same. Now let's verify the test configuration whether we have defined all the properties successfully or not. Yeah, so email was successfully sent. And here if you just observe that, yes, just now we got it one test email, and this is the test email sent from Jenkins. So if everything is good, so it is going to send us the test mail. And now Yeah, so that is done. And now let's apply these or save these changes. Okay, that is like we have done this Jenkins integrating with the email server, but that's not enough. So what is the next activity we are expecting is we need to enable the email notification. But how do we enable that email notification? Where do you have this? Now, if you go to the job section and configure, but sending email notification, that should be as a post build activity. That means in case this build activity is failed, then we are trying to configure this in the post build action to trigger the email notification. So we need to add this one step in the post build section, that is sending email notification. So if you use it, this option, but here we can define that the only recipients. So that means who would like to receive the email in case this job is got failed. The recipients you can define as per this job who would like to monitor it. The recipients like so the same email ID I'm going to use it. So all the emails you can define that with the comma separation. So with comma and one more email ID you can define like that, multiple email IDs we can define it. Or DLs we can define it. So to which DL does do you want to send that email notification? The sent DL we can define here itself. And send email for every unstable build. Like so if you like to send that every unstable build. So this is going to helpful to send that in case the build is unstable. And send separate emails to individuals who broke the build. But what is that the who broke the build? Who broke it? So this option when it is going to helpful is if this job is integrated with the source code management, and the source code management each and every time the build is running about it, it is going to try to pull the code from the repository. And after pulling the code and it is trying to run the build process, and it is going to, if it is going to get the failure, then who has committed the latest commit. So if you just try to remember that in the git configuration section we were defining that the username and email ID. So who has done the latest commit, that commit related the user account will be taken, and to that the user which will send the email notification who broke the build. That means the latest commit which was happened, that commit was given the problem, and that commit which user is done to that user account, the email will be triggered. So send separate emails to individuals who broke the build. And here you can define it unstable build. And always, so to which email IDs that do you want to send it, the recipients you can define here. Yeah, these are all options which are available, but we didn't integrate with the source code repository, then there is no usage of this. Yeah, so now we have enabled that sending the email notification and to this email in case the job is unstable. Now let's apply it and save the changes. Now let me run the job once again. The build job number 4, which is processing and building remotely on this slave machine and running about these commands, the pwd date command and l command not found. And finally, if we just observe this output, sending emails to this user account. Now if we verify that, yes, we got that one email saying that the build failed in the Jenkins. Build failed in the Jenkins. Which job? There is demo job. But at which build number? There is a build number 4. And here you can see that the complete output, whatever it was generated in the build section, that is started by which user and building remotely on this machine. And the finally, the user can see this in the email itself what's happened about the build. So L command not found. Then he can go back to the job and we can edit this and we can specify that the resolving that issue, and we can apply it and save it. If I try to run it now, is it going to send the email notification or not? So normal cases, this the build is successful. This time it is going to perform that the build is successful. But what it is going to do thus the Jenkins is the email notification. If you just observe here, even the command is successful also, the build is successful also, but still it is trying to send the email notification. But what is that email? If you just observe that, yeah, the Jenkins build is back to normal. Yes, which is confirming that about our Jenkins job is, or it has come back to that normal state. And so this is the build number, so this is a job number and this is the build number, and you can see that, so which is redirecting to this job. This is the build number 5 is successful. Yeah, so and next time if you try to trigger that once again, go back to the job, and if you try to trigger once again, now is it going to try to trigger the email notification? No, it doesn't. So now it is not sending any email notification. Why? The build is back. I mean, you got that message in the previous. And in case the next job is the failure, again it starts that sending the email notification until that the job is recoverable. Yeah, so that is the beauty of this Jenkins, which is helping about it. You can easy way to define about your process, like with email notifications and to whom does do you want to trigger it. So maximum which have taken half an hour. So this, but we got it about it, like the complete the job and job commands execution, the command in case it is got failed. So to whom do you want to send that email notification? So all that features as ready-made available. Suppose if the project manager is asking about it, so define this kind of the script, like run some shell commands in case the shell commands are got failed to get that email notification. So we need to struggle with that, like setting about that the SMTP server and implementing about that mailx commands which are required to send that email notifications. So everything we need to implement it manually. But if you just like a GUI based, we can define that. So the notification systems and as well as the build process systems and easy way to integrate with that other tools. Yeah, and as well as tracking about the complete builds which are happened there so far, at what time, at which build was executed, what is the status of that build, everything as a history which you can track it here. And here in this the job homepage itself, you can see that the last build was the build number 6, stable build, successful build number, failed build number, that is the last failed build number 4, and which was done 3 minutes 43 seconds back, an unsuccessful build and completed build. So the complete build history which we can track it about it, how many builds we have executed. Suppose if I run that shell script in one of the command prompt, and if I close the command prompt, then I don't have this the build history. Or even if you use it about that the redirection options, redirections like the only one file which we can do that always, like either appending options, or you need to write another shell script to take the backups of those like redirection files. Yeah, so that's the main advantage of the Jenkins or the CI servers which are helping in the market. Yeah, so now if you just observe that, yes, we have created the job, and in the job section, so we have defined the build section, some build options, so how to define it, or how to define this, so the target nodes, on which node that we want to run it, and how do we enable the email notification by integrating with the email server. Yeah, there are some points which we understood so far. The next one more, what do we do extending about the job section is, like the next point is, let me draw this one diagram, then we can understand this the scenario. Suppose we have the three environments, like so one is development environment and staging environment, and then the next third environment which are the production. But what are the tasks we are going to perform on each environment, I am not talking about it, but just if you try to understand that. So total we have this three environments, and once development has been completed, so which is going to start about this staging environment and staging has been completed. This is about development environment, staging environment, production environment. Like there's three environments which we have that. Okay, we have the some of the activities like ambient clean and then uploading that artifact and downloading and deploying that. Some of the activities which we need to perform on development environment. And once all the activities have been completed in the development environment, then as a CA and a CD process point of view, we are expecting about a staging environment. Yes, it has to trigger about the staging environment, and staging environment, what are the tasks that is required to perform? Those tasks required to execute it. And once these tasks have been completed, then it has to trigger about production related activities. If all are good here. If all are good here, staging. If all the tasks or activities are good here, then trigger about the production and production related activities. But which activities, like yes, we'll come back to that's like some of the process point of view. But how do we manage it about this process? So three different environments related activities, and one environment activity has been completed, you need to trigger about that another environment and another environment, like that you need to trigger that the multiple tasks in the process which are belong to that multiple environments. But how do we manage it about is all the tasks we don't define in single job, right? If you define this in the single job, like a development activity, staging jobs, and staging environment activities, production environment, like what are the process related activities we have this, if we define everything in the single job, then that is not going to, I mean, that is not reusable, that is not easy manageable, or you cannot handle about the separate environment, separate scopes point of view. So what is the recommended approach which I have to say is, so all these environments we can define into three different jobs, like a development environment, all the activities are separate job, and the staging environment into the separate jobs, and the production environment into the separate jobs. But what are the activities you are defining? That activities, okay, on the basis of the requirement. But just try to understand that how to define the flow. So development activities, staging environment, so production environment, so all these environment related activities we can define into three different jobs. But after creating all these three different jobs for the three environments or the three tasks or three stages point of in the pipeline, if we define like all these individually, then there is no meaning. What we are expecting is, if the development job is completed, all the tasks, then what is the next stage it is required to trigger is staging environment job has to be triggered. On the base of this output of this development environment task, then staging environment job is required to trigger it. And then it has to start about that all the activities which are defined in the staging environment. And once the staging environment has been completed, then it has to trigger about production environment tasks. But what you have defined, yes, that is on the basis of the requirement here. But if we define like this all, like individual jobs, and after defining the individual jobs, then we need to integrate it all these jobs. The integration is nothing but triggering options. So what is the triggering option? If the job is success, okay, trigger the staging environment. If the job is successful, trigger the production environment job. So what do we call this is, and if you just try to understand is, staging environment job is having one upstream job, that is the development job. And staging environment job point of view, if you just try to understand that the staging environment job is having this one downstream job, that is production environment. And if I talk about the development environment activities point of view, development environment job is having this one downstream job, that is the staging environment job. And staging environment point of view, if we talk it, one is upstream, that is a development job, and one is downstream job. And production environment point of view, we have this one upstream job, but we don't have any downstream jobs. Yeah, so what are the concepts we are trying to understand? It is in these pipelines. If you are using that, especially freestyles, we need to define that upstream and downstream jobs. That means integrating that the one job with another job on the base of the first job result output, or on the base of the success or the failures of the first job. So the next concept what we have this is, how do we define the upstream and downstream jobs? Yeah, so to have this activity, so I'm going to take it about the Sara. We are going to create it about that three jobs we'll create it. So that is the development job, staging job, production job. but we try to run some small commands. I'm not going to talk about all this, the Maven integration just now. So just how do we define the flow of executions between the jobs to understand it? So we create 3 jobs, and so we use it about the staging environment job. And in the staging environment job, we try to understand how do we define that upstream jobs and how do we define that downstream jobs. That means which job you are in. That means, so at which job level you are going to define these activities is very, very important. Suppose I open the development job, and if I would like to define the staging environment job, for the development job, I need to configure the downstream job about the staging job. Suppose I'm editing the configuration changes of the staging job, and staging job, if I would like to define it on the basis of this sequence, then staging environment in the upstream job point of view, development job I need to define, and staging environment in the configuration section, downstream job I need to define as a production job. So how do we configure that upstream and downstream jobs? Let me show this activity. Yeah, let me create 3 more jobs. So this demo just like we skip it that. So that just to understand that like how do we export the jobs, or how do we that output of the jobs, or how do we enable that email notification. So how do we see that this purpose we have used. Now let me define that 3 more jobs. Like first job is development job, but I'm going to, what I'm going to do this is I'm going to copy this job from demo job. Demo job already we had defined, like slave machine and some commands we had defined, email notification we had defined. That means everything I'm just cloning to this job. So instead of using the freestyle, if I use it again, I need to configure all the configurations once again. I need to repeat it. So what is the one more option which we have? This is, if you want to create a new item from the other existing jobs, you can use this option, that is a copy from. But which job does do you want to copy that? Just define this the job name here, and let's go for that, creating the job. Now the same description, and already slave machine has been configured, and yes, so the build section is defined, and the email notification also is available. Yeah, but anyway, leave it off it. I am not going to talk it this for all those sections. Now let me create 2 more jobs like this. Like this is the development job which I have created. Like that, let me repeat the 2 more jobs. That is staging job. I'm just cloning from the demo job. I'm just applying and saving. But main objective is how to define that upstream and downstream jobs. So let me create one more job. Apply it and save it. Yeah, if I go to home page, yes, we got it, the 3 jobs: development job, production job, and staging job. But these jobs are individual jobs now. Suppose if I trigger the development job which executes and which completes, then I need to go for the manual. Once this development job is successful done, then I need to go to the staging job and I need to manually trigger it. And once staging job is successfully done, then I need to go for the manually triggering about production job. How do you trigger the manual is, so select the job, go to the build now. But instead of doing that, can we make it the relationship between all these 3 jobs? Yes, that's what we are trying to understand here. There's upstream job, downstream job. But to understand it, how do you configure the upstream job and how do you configure the downstream job? What is the job I am going to do that the configuration is? I'm going to take it the staging job. So staging job, if we select it or if we use it the configuration section, then we have that option to configure the upstream job, and as well as in the same staging job to configure the downstream job. That means how to configure the upstream and how to configure downstream. We can understand it from this current job. Yeah, let me open this staging job and go to the configure section. Okay, so what is the first requirement is? The first we need to link this staging job with the development job. That means if the development job is executed and it is successful, then you need to trigger the staging job. So if you just observe that before the staging build activities to complete it, it is required to complete development activities or the development build activities. So is it a pre-build activity? Is it a post-build activity? So staging build activities point of, if you just understand that development job activities are the pre-build jobs. That means in the staging job section, in the pre-build section, we need to configure or we need to map with this development job. So what is the section that we have is, if you go to the build trigger section, this is the pre-build section. And one of the option which is available is build after other projects are built. Yeah, so if you select this, build after other projects are built, that means the job will be triggered after other projects are built. So build this current job after other projects are built. But what is the other job? That's other job. What is that other job? So which you have for the staging is development job. Once this development job is built it, then or after, after other projects built, then current job built it. Yes. So what is the other job which you have is, so let's define that development job. Or you can add it to multiple jobs as well as. Yeah, so if you, we have the space issue, just to remove the space, then it will be identified that if you are selecting from the drop down. Yeah, so this is a project to watch it. So now what it is going to do, the job is, the job keep on watching about this job. And if the job is executed and if it is got successful, then it is going to try to trigger this staging job. In which context does do you want to trigger it? You can enable it. Trigger only if build is stable. If this build is stable, then trigger it. This current staging job. Trigger even if the build is unstable. Even the development job is unstable also, you can trigger about this current job. No, we don't do that in the pipelines. Upstream job is successful, then trigger about the downstream job. Pipelines point of view. Or some scenarios maybe you'll be handled. Even the upstream job is down also, or upstream job is failed also, you can trigger about it, the current job. So if you have that, the scenario, that is a second option, or the failure cases also you can use it. So there are the options are available. When do you want to trigger this job on the base of output of the upstream job? Yeah, the pipeline point of view, the development activities completed, then staging activities will be started. Yeah, the development job. Yeah, this option. Now what we have defined is in the build trigger section, to configure the upstream, this is the configuration. To configure the upstream, go to the build triggers, build after other projects build. That means current job build it after this development job is built. In which context? Trigger only if the build is stable. Yeah, so that's about the option which you can select it. There is upstream job. And the next one more activity which you have for this job is downstream job also we need to define it. But a downstream job, how to define it? Once the build activity has been completed, once this current build activities has been completed, in the post build section, trigger about this job. Post build section, yes, downstream jobs which will be defined in the post build and upstream jobs will be defined in build trigger options. Yeah, build trigger, this is the before the build. But what we are trying to use it this now, the post build. So if you go to the post build section and you can select that the one of the step, that is build other products. That means once the job is successful, build other projects. So if you just use it this option, but which projects that do you want to build it? So for the staging job point of view, once the job is built, you would like to trigger other job, but which job is that other job is prod job. And a trigger only if the build is stable. That means this current build, what are the steps you are defining that these steps are stable, then it is going to try to trigger this production job. Yeah, that's about how do we define that upstream and how do we define the downstream jobs. And if I apply it and if I save it now, so if you just verify that we are in the staging job section and upstream projects. What are the upstream projects for this staging job is development job. And what is the downstream project for this job is there's a production job. And if you go to the production job and if you open this production job and a production job is having this one upstream project. What is this? The upstream project is staging job. Like that, if you go to this the development job and if you verify this in the job status section, so it is a this one downstream project. But what is the downstream project is staging job. Yeah, so now so we can check it about it the process. So but now if you'd like to see this executing all the jobs, which job we need to trigger manually first. So development environment job trigger the manually or scheduler or on the base of the code updates which you have this in the repository. You can define this other triggering options. I'll come back later. But for the timing, development job trigger the manually, then automatically if this is executed successfully, which is going to trigger the staging job. And the staging job is successfully executed, then it is going to trigger the production job. Yeah, let's observe this now. This the flow of executions. Now let's go to the development job. This is the topmost job. And build now. We are triggering the manually. But this is also we can define the scheduler or this also we can define on the basis of other the changes. We have some options. I'll come back later. Now the build now is triggered about the job. And if you go to this job, and this is started by which user? Admin user account. And it is building remotely on the slave machine. Yes, we have configured the slave machine and running about there are all the commands we have defined. If we define that the MEN or the Docker build are on the base of this, the commands, those commands which will be executed. But those commands to execute it, tools we need to define it. So normally how we are executing the same commands, we take it and we define in the Jenkins. But here, so we had just defined some commands. And finally, if you observe the triggering a new build. So now once this development job is completed, it is triggering about this new build of the job, that is staging job. And if you go to the staging job section, your staging job is also having this one build number. We didn't trigger the manually about this. If you go to the output of this build, there is a staging job, the build number 1, and it is started by this upstream project. This is not triggered by the admin user. This is triggered by development job. And development in the development job also, which build it is triggered? Build number 1, which is triggered about this. But originally, this development job build number 1 is triggered by admin user account. And building remotely on the slave machine, and there are the commands which are executed. And once these tasks have been completed, it is triggering about that production job. And now if you go to the production job, and you can see that here one more job which is triggered. But who has triggered this? Originally, this is started by upstream project, that is staging job. Staging job, which is a build number 1. Build number 1 of the staging job is triggered about this production job. But originally, the staging job build number 1 is caused by upstream project. That's we have this the development job. That is the build number 1. And originally, this is triggered by admin user account. That means this development job is triggered by admin user account. And finally, the build is successful. Yeah, so this is the flow for executions. That means how do we define this one job with another jobs? Yeah, so upstream and downstream jobs have got this point, but a demo job, like we didn't have the any like interaction with the other job. This is the like isolated job or individual job. But remaining all these 3 jobs, if you just observe that, yes, these are all having that like the development and the links with us all these jobs. Yeah. So that's the points which we have. And now, okay, if I just trigger about it, a development job. Okay, let me trigger once again. And if you go to the Jenkins homepage, but it is not taking the too much time to see the jobs which are in the process. So because there are the fraction of seconds which are taking, and staging job which is continuing, but here it is not able to refresh that because it is taking this a fraction of the seconds. Yeah, so these are points which we have and which are in the process. So these are second job is triggered, and the second job, if you go to that, yes, the production job is triggered. The production job, if you go for that, the second build number is triggered. Yeah, so this is like how do we just define the upstream and downstream jobs? But the point what we have this is how I can see that. I mean, so we have defined like this. So, I mean, so we have this total 20 jobs which are defined like this with upstream and downstream jobs. But how do I see that all these upstream and downstream jobs are like? So if you would like to see the upstream and downstream job, you need to go to the job and you need to identify that which job is the first and which job is the second. That is very, very difficult if you have so many jobs. So what is the next option we are going to talk at is, so how do we see that the complete pipeline? That means the job number one, which is triggering the job number two, which is triggering the job number three, the complete flow of the pipelines. To view that, the complete the jobs pipelines, we have some plugins which are helping that. So that is a build pipeline plugin. So what is the build pipeline plugin and how do we use it, that build pipeline plugin? Before talking about it, the plugin, so we should know that first of all, how do we install the plugins, or how do we update the plugins, or how do we remove the plugins? So the next activity point of view, what do we have this the dependency is like, so here we have defined the upstream and downstream jobs, but each and every time, so if I would like to see that which build number output is triggered about that which build number of the secondary job, so that is very, very, very difficult for me. So do we have the better view of this the complete all the jobs process? So let me just to try to search it about it, the build pipeline plugin in Jenkins. Yeah, so you can see the some information. This plugin provides the build pipeline information and how you have this the graphical representation is. So this is the representation of this the pipeline which you'll be having. So that means so which the job is triggering about this next job, and which job is in the process of the current job, and the next which job is going to try to call it. So the complete the pipeline flow which we can see that, and you can trigger the jobs here itself. You can run it about this the complete build pipeline. So or you can see the history, or you can configure about it, or you can delete it about this the build process, or you can manage it. So some configurations which you can do that with a better GUI representation, how the flow of execution of the jobs in upstream and downstream jobs. How do we configure the upstream and downstream job is this approach. But once it is configured, how do you track that regularly? Which are all the, I mean, the jobs are triggering, which job is the first, which job is the second, and which job is in the process, the current process. If you like to track it, so with that's normal approach, that is very, very difficult. So what is the plugin that is supporting is the build pipeline plugin. But how do we install it and how do we configure about this build pipelines? But to understand this, which we should know, this the one more prerequisite activity, that is the plugins. How do we install it and how do we uninstall it? So that's the concept which you should know that, yeah, which takes the half an hour of the time. So shall we continue that half an hour? Like how to manage the plugins?
Venkat, already it's 12 o'clock in Singapore right now.
Oh,
So,
okay. Sorry for that. Okay, we'll wind up for today, and tomorrow we'll see this activity. The first
okay.
plugin. Okay. So tomorrow first we see this how do we configure or how do we manage the plugins, and then we go for this understanding about like a build pipeline plugin, how do we configure it, and how do we define this the pipeline, the better view. Yeah, so we'll continue tomorrow. But let me conclude it what we discussed one time about this today's concept point of view. We are trying to understand like so the first how to create a job, like creating a job, yes, which we have this option like so define the name and select the template, but the templates, the main two templates are available. One is the freestyle and the second one is which you have is the pipeline, but the pipeline will come back to understand it. But the first one which we have is the freestyle. We are trying to understand it is we are trying to understand the freestyle is everything GUI based, but the pipeline is advanced one. We'll come back, we have the separate section on that. So there's a pipeline plugin, how do we use it to define the jobs. But freestyle we have selected and we are observing about it the pre-build section, build section and the post-build section. In the pre-build section, three important sections you can just remember that. One is build triggering options and build environment section and source code management. That means so which course, I mean, which source code repository that do you want to integrate that? So those three sections are the pre-build, and the next build section is the build section. You can define the steps like to call it about the maven commands or to call it about the land commands, or you can use it about our shell command prompt to define the list of all the commands to execute it in the build section on the base of the Windows or on the base of the Linux slave machine. So either shell or batch command prompt we can use it. That's the build sections. And the last section which you have this is post build section. You can trigger that email notification and all that stuff, but we will come back to that. So separate sections we have this to understand pre-build sections and the post build sections separately. Yeah, that's the understanding the freestyle. And finally, so we were defining this one job, how to define the slave machine and how do we define the sequence of the task. And the important activity we are trying to understand, how do we integrate the Jenkins with the email server? That is, go to the manage Jenkins and then like define within the manage Jenkins, define about like I mean in the email configure system, then email notification, then integrate with the email server. The email server here we have taken the Gmail for about our demo purpose, but in the organization we don't use the Gmail, so we use it about our the organization specific exchange servers or the email servers which we have this from the IT team. We take it that information, will configure it. There's the integrating with the email server is the first and foremost section. And once it is successfully integrated, then you can go back to that about our job section. In the jobs in the post build section, we can enable the email notification. Yeah, so that's about there's the integrating with the email server. But the beauty what we have is in case the build is failed, it is going to trigger the email notification. And the next build which is successful of this the current build which is a failed, the next build is successful, again it is going to trigger the notification saying about it about our build is back. And in case the build is failure, once again it starts to trigger the email notification. It doesn't send that unnecessary email notification each and every time, only the build is failure. And after the build failure, what of the job which is successful, only that success job email notification which is triggering that. We just observe this in our email, have received that any. Yeah, so after that we didn't receive any email notification because we were doing that with the successful messages. Yeah, that's about the email integration and enabling that email notification in case the build is unstable to trigger the email notification. Yeah, that is one section. And the next we are trying to understand is pipelines, how to define it. Yeah, so like we will be using about this the complete pipelines in the CI/CD. In that pipelines, you are going to create so many jobs on the base of the requirement. But any job you are creating on the base of the task which will define in the command section. But how do we define that the one job with the another job, like the job is executed successfully, then triggering that the second job? Like how do we define is upstream and downstream job? Upstream is this is the before, I mean current job point of view. Always think about the current job. Which job you are configuring about it, that job thinking about it. Upstream job will be defined in the pre-build section, that is the triggering section. Build after other products are built, the upstream job. And the downstream jobs, how do you configure in the current job is, go to the post build section and use it about the build step, build other projects. So downstream jobs in the post build section, build other projects, and upstream job in the triggering section, build after other parts of the build. Yeah, that is like a defining about it, and you can see that the upstream and downstream jobs, but each and every job going and observing about it, which job is the upstream and which job is the downstream, that is very, very difficult. But easy way to view that all these upstream and downstream jobs, we have the build pipeline plugin. So how do we install it and how do we use it, the build pipeline plugin to run this the complete pipelines? This is especially helping about it, the freestyle projects. But already, I mean, if you just observe that in our jobs configuration section, and if you'd like to create a job, and here you can see the pipeline option. But this pipeline is different, and the build pipeline plugin is different. Build pipeline, it is just a view. So in this Jenkins section, you can see there's some views we can create it. So once the build pipeline is installed, you can create about your pipeline view. That means how the jobs are interacted and which job is in the process, which job is the next job. And you can define that the CI/CD with the manual promotions, and the manually how do we promote it. The build pipeline is the powerful plugin. So this plugin, we go further configuring that. But to configure the plugin management, which we should know. That means the fourth activity, as we were trying to understand in the Jenkins, like the plugin configurations. So this activity we need to discuss that. Once this is discussed, then we'll come back to that, the build pipeline. That's, we'll see that tomorrow. Yeah, so that's all for today, so which we have. And tomorrow we'll continue this, some more like options, the plugins management and configuring the build pipeline. And once that is defined, then we start about that, how do we integrate with the Git, and how do we define this, the process, like the Maven build process, and then artifacts uploading to the Nexus and deploying this to the Tomcat. We write it to some shell scripts to deploy that application to the Tomcat servers. So that's process, we look at about that with the complete process. Yeah, so that's for today, so which we have, and the tomorrow we'll continue this, the remaining like activities. Yeah. So that's all for today. So any queries or the questions? Yeah, so good, thank you. So that's for today, so we'll meet it tomorrow. So thank you for the day.